In John chapter 9, Jesus healed the man who was born blind. The man's testimony was very simple yet effective. I was blind and now I can see. My testimony is just like that man's. I was dead. Now I'm alive. My name is Richard Oduntan. On September 26, 2021, around 6 p.m., a day after my daughter's return 9, I had a drowning incident and was dead for at least 15 minutes, most likely more. My heart stopped. My body was limp. My loving wife and children were the first to witness it. For 11 minutes or so, my wife Yemi performed CPR to no avail. Eventually, EMT arrived and took over the CPR, but also initially to no avail. It took a jolt from the defibrillator for my family to finally get some good news. We have a pulse. We have a heartbeat. Prior to this, I had drowned in our home pool in Bermuda. They told me I had been diving and staying under the water longer each time. So when I didn't come up, my children who were in the pool with me doing their own thing initially thought it was a prank. We don't know exactly when my heart stopped in the pool, but by the time my wife showed up at the pool and saw my limp body in the water, my just turned 9-year-old daughter had been trying her very best to pull me out. She had dived into the water about 3 times already, but I was too heavy for her. Eli, my 5-year-old boy, had gone to alert mom, who was in the house, that daddy wasn't coming up. Thankfully, they were all able to get me out of the water, but time already passed. Yemi began CPR the way she knew to, while Zoe called 911. She said initially water was coming out from my mouth, nose, eyes, and ears, which was very distressing for her. Once they got a 911 operator on the phone, Yemi was then able to perform proper CPR, which lasted for about 11 minutes until EMT arrived and took over. All the while, nothing happened. I was gone. EMT spent at least 2 minutes working on me before they finally got a pulse and heartbeat after using a defibrillator. With some minutes having passed before Yemi started CPR, this means at least 15 minutes had elapsed altogether before my heart started beating again. Once there was a pulse, I was immediately transported to the hospital in Bermuda and admitted into the emergency ward. I was in a coma. On getting there was nothing but bad news. The doctor said I was unstable and in a very critical condition. One of Bermuda's leading experts on scuba diving accidents, who was one of the doctors at the emergency that day, told Yemi that I was probably not going to make it, and even if I did, that I was not going to have brain function. My heart had stopped for too long, and my brain and organs were starved of oxygen for too long, he had said. Yemi was told to prepare, but instead of breaking down and crying, she respectfully responded to the doctor that we're a family of faith and that we have hope. Another doctor told her to pray that there was nothing they could do. Given the ongoing COVID crisis, families were not being allowed into the emergency unit. But since they thought my family was never going to see me again, they were allowed to stay by my bed for about 30 minutes. During this time, Yemi did a WhatsApp video call with one of my brothers, Nii, who is a part-time pastor at the Redeemed Christian Church of God in Canada. Together with my children, they prayed. Yemi, Zoe, and Eli holding different parts of my limbs while I laid on the ICU bed. Nii later said, watching Zoe and Eli praying inspired him to ask God that he must answer their prayers. With the COVID crisis, ICU was very busy. Thankfully, a bed became available shortly after getting to emergency, and so they were able to move me there. I was admitted to the ICU at 9:45 p.m. Later, one of the ICU doctors sought out Yemi to explain that 15 minutes without oxygen was way too long, and that there isn't much she can do. She said as plainly as she could that if my heart stops again, she wouldn't resuscitate. Yemi gave the same response she had given to the emergency room doctors. We have faith and are hopeful. The doctors seemed offended, as if Yemi hadn't understood the gravity of the situation. But she did. She had no option but to choose God. A few days later, Yemi quietly sent a request to the ICU administrator to have this particular doctor removed from my care. She wanted a doctor who wasn't so negative and who would fight for me regardless of how bad the circumstances got. However, the fact was that this doctor was only speaking from experience and knowledge. It is generally believed that permanent damage starts in the brain only after 4 minutes of being deprived of oxygen. 15 minutes was indeed way too long. The situation was dire, but my family knew that what I needed was a miracle, and they were willing to fight for it. It is an understatement to say this was a trying time for both my immediate and extended family. Everyone went into a ceaseless prayer mode. Before long, different people were praying and fasting for me, alongside my very large extended family. My siblings' different prayer cycles, my friends from all over, my mom's pastors in Nigeria, and so many other people. Not only were people praying, but words of encouragement from the scriptures were coming in to Yemi, and she was also encouraging herself by seeking out relevant scripture verses. Everyone had to stretch their faith, considering the prognosis. To the glory of God, by the next day, September 27th, there was some good news. The ICU doctor that morning told Yemi that I was able to pull back when he pinched my fingers. Yemi gave him my bottle of anointing oil to apply to my forehead as often as they could. Despite his skepticism, he took the bottle and promised to inform the nurses to apply it. He later confirmed that day in the evening that he himself applied the anointing oil on me as instructed. By the next day, September the 28th, I started opening my eyes and looking around. It was the second miracle. They said I was following all their commands, but sadly that I also had an infection. The same lady doctor that said she wouldn't resuscitate me also reiterated to my wife on this day that they've heard that I was a very smart individual, but that if I survive this, I may end up having a very limited cognitive ability. Another doctor expressed concern later that day that they weren't sure what my brain would be like after all of this. By September 29th/September 30, I was responding more to commands. According to the doctors, if they say wiggle your toes and squeeze our hands, I was able to respond. Clearly, God was at work. This daily dose of good news gave my family hope. Yemi was able to share something positive almost daily after speaking with the doctors. But there was still a long way to go. The doctors said they had more questions at this point. By October 1, only the 5th day after the incident, I was awake. I was given a board and pen to write so I could communicate. Yemi says that my writing was just as good as before the incident itself, which gave her more hope. They said I asked the doctors when I could go back to swimming. I was giving thumbs up and blowing kisses to my wife and kids. I was asking for books to read. Despite how bad the initial prognosis was, things were now starting to look up. They had said I might never wake up from a coma, that my heart may go again given how unstable and critical I was the first day. They had said that it could take several months to wake up if that happened. But here we were. Less than 1 week after getting to the hospital, I was awake and having conversations. The miraculous God was at work. Everyone knew it, even the doctors and nurses. They called me the Miracle Man. On October 4, they took me off of my ventilator, but sadly the result was not what was expected. I became delirious. There were talks of doing a tracheostomy if I couldn't get off the ventilator. But God's plan for me was always total recovery. By the next day, October 5, they reattempted taking off the ventilator, and this time it was successful, although I still needed a breathing tube. On October the 8th, less than 2 weeks after the incident, I was discharged home. By this time, I already had a couple of work calls right from the ICU. The normal procedure was to discharge patients from the ICU to general care, but I was in such a great condition that they let me go home straight from the ICU. God had done it. I am the Miracle Man. My recovery had gone against every expected norm. I was even able to have a meal of spaghetti before leaving the hospital. This was not a miracle that I heard or read about. It happened to me. I was dead. We've read in Hebrews 11 verse 35 how women in the Bible received their loved ones back again from the dead. This is now the testimony of the women in my life. From Yemi and Zoe to my mom, sisters, mother-in-law, sister-in-laws, nieces and friends. There are lots of prayer warriors in my family. and social circle, both men and women. God in His mercy and love came through for all of us. All the nurses I interacted with before leaving the hospital, they acknowledged how strong my wife's faith was. The truth is, I believe God gave her a gift of special faith during this particular period to encourage everyone else and to push even the doctors. She was in their face constantly, but God also made it clear that we were thankful for their efforts. The reality of this event only started to hit me just before I left the ICU. God wants me to still be here to complete the journey He has set for me here. There's no other explanation I could come up with. On the day of the event itself, just about anything could have been different. That would have ensured that my body wasn't discovered until much later. For example, in previous years, Yemi always took Zoe to New York for a birthday, their own annual girls-only trip. That would have meant only my 5-year-old Eli would have been around when the accident happened. It was also true that I was alone at home for parts of this past summer when Yemi and the children were in Florida. I swam a lot during that period, and this accident could have happened then. Finally, Yemi could have been out on this particular day, leaving only me and the kids at home as we have done many times before. She called it a bonding time. In closing, like Apostle John said in 1 John chapter 1 verse 1, that which we have seen with our eyes, which we have looked at and our hands have touched, this we proclaim concerning the word of life. My experience is one of those. It happened to me. Not only did Jesus raise me from the dead, He also made me whole. My mind is as sharp as it's ever been. Nothing is broken or damaged, and nothing is missing. I give God all the glory. He is indeed a miracle-working God, the God who does not abandon His own. Please thank Him on my behalf and thank Him with me. I will forever be grateful to Him, and so will all of my family. Jesus is Lord.
Oh, that was a good one. Of course you are. Of course you are. There you go. There you go. That was a good shot. That was a good shot. Nice one.